Careful with that corner piece. It's heavier than it looks. Let's see the contents. Everything appears to be in order.
The widow was sold to pay debts. The buyer was the duke who ruined her late husband. His true motive shattered her. The auctioneer's voice carried through the house like water through a cracked foundation, finding every room, every hollow place, every corner that Lavinia Sterling had believed was still hers. She stood in the doorway of the drawing room and watched a man she had never seen before lift her mother's escritoire and turn it over to examine the joinery, and she kept her hands at her sides because there was nothing else to do with them. The hall was full of strangers. They moved through the house with the comfortable authority of people who have been invited somewhere and know it, touching the candlesticks and pulling back the curtains and speaking in the low, professional murmur of men calculating what things are worth, now that the man who owned them is dead and the woman who remains has no legal standing to keep any of it. Reginald's debts had been, in the end, considerable. She had not known how considerable. That was the thing she returned to in the hours between midnight and 4 a.m, when the house was quiet enough for honest thinking. She had not known. She had been his wife for 6 years, and she had not known, and she was not certain now whether that was because he had hidden it or because she had not looked. The auctioneer was reading from his list: the Broadwood pianoforte, the set of 12 dining chairs, the writing desk and the study with the brass fittings. The room changed, and she felt it before she understood it. A shift in the quality of attention in the hall, the way a room changes when someone enters it who changes rooms. She turned. Arthur Wellesley, Duke of Wren's Crest, stood at the front door. He was not what she had rebuilt him into over 2 years of grief and rage, and the specific bitter comfort of having someone to blame. He was simply a man, tall, in good but unremarkable traveling clothes, with the look of someone who has driven a long way and has not decided yet what he thinks about having arrived. He was perhaps 40. His face gave away very little. His eyes found her immediately. Not the way a stranger's eyes find a person in a room. The way someone finds a person they have been looking for across a very long distance and have now, finally, stopped pretending they were not looking. She did not move. She was standing in the doorway of the drawing room in a black dress beginning to show its age at the cuffs, with a house full of strangers pricing her life, and the man who had destroyed her husband was standing at her front door, and she understood in the space between one breath and the next exactly why he was there. He had come to see what he had won. "Mrs. Sterling," he said. His voice was quiet, not gentle. She would not give him gentle, but quiet, in the way of a man who has learned that volume is not the same as authority. And underneath the quietness, something she could not immediately name, something that had no business being in the voice of a man surveying his acquisition, something that sounded, if she had been in any state to hear it correctly, like relief. "Your Grace," she said. And the auctioneer looked between them with the mild professional interest of a man who has seen harder rooms than this. "I understand," Arthur Wellesley said, "that the estate is being settled today." "As you see," she said. He looked at the hall, at the strangers with their lists and their measuring eyes, at her mother's escritoire turned upside down on the floor, at the house that had been, for 6 years, the container of her life, being emptied in front of her. He looked at her, and something in his face did the thing that faces do when a person is working very hard to keep them still. "I have made an offer to the creditors," he said, "for the full estate, the house and contents." A pause, carrying more weight than the words themselves, and the resolution of all outstanding debts. The hall was very quiet. She looked at him across the length of the entrance hall, across the strangers and the catalogued furniture and the ruins of a marriage she had defended and mourned and built her survival on, and she felt something move through her that had no clean name, rage and grief and the terrible specific shame of a woman who has just understood that she has been purchased. by him. Of all people, by him. I see, she said. Her voice did not shake. But let me tell you how we got here. Because she had hated him for 2 years with the clean and sustaining hatred of a woman who knows exactly who is responsible for her suffering. And he had let her hate him. And the reason he had let her is the reason that eventually broke everything open and put it back together in a shape she had not known to hope for. If you have ever been loved in silence by someone who thought your happiness was more important than their own and never knew it until it was almost too late, stay with me. Prudence had been 17 years old when she first understood that Arthur Wellesley looked at Miss Lavinia Harcourt the way people in books looked at things they had decided they could not have. She had just entered service, her first real position, housemaid at the Harcourt estate, assigned to the East Wing rooms and the general household under Mrs. Beale, who ran the place with the quiet authority of a woman who had been doing it for 30 years and intended to do it for 30 more. Prudence was 17 and observant in the way that people are observant when they are new to a place and still reading everything, before familiarity makes you stop seeing what is in front of you. Miss Lavinia, Mrs. Sterling she had been for 6 years now, and Mrs. Sterling the widow for 2, had grown up 3 miles from Wren's Crest, the daughter of a country gentleman with a good library and a better understanding of figures than most men twice his age. She had inherited both. Arthur Wellesley had been her neighbor, her childhood companion, the boy who rode over on Tuesday mornings, because Tuesday was when her father held his informal reading hours, and Arthur had developed, at approximately 14, the habit of being wherever Lavinia was. Prudence had watched it across 2 years of Tuesday mornings. The way he listened when she talked, not with the impatience of a boy waiting for a girl to finish speaking, but with the particular attention of someone for whom what she said was the most interesting thing in the room. The way he positioned himself at the edge of whatever gathering she was part of, close enough to be present, far enough not to impose. The way, when she laughed, something in him settled, the particular settling of a person who has been braced for a long time and has, without warning, been given a moment's reason not to be. Lavinia had not noticed, or if she had noticed, she had not named it. She called him her oldest friend and meant it warmly and entirely, and Prudence had watched Arthur receive oldest friend with the composure of a man accepting something that is not what he wanted, because the alternative is to have nothing at all. Then Mr. Reginald Sterling had come to the county, and he was handsome and well-mannered, and he looked at Lavinia as though she were the only person in any room he had ever entered, and Lavinia, who had been looked at by Arthur Wellesley her entire adult life without knowing it, found this entirely new and rather wonderful. Arthur had said nothing. Prudence had watched him say nothing with a faithfulness and a cost that she thought about sometimes, in the way you think about the things you have witnessed that you were never meant to witness, the things that stay with you because they were so entirely unperformed. He had stood at the back of the church on the day of the wedding, with his hands folded and his face arranged, and his eyes on a point somewhere above the altar, and Prudence, who had been the only person watching him instead of the bride, had seen him make a decision. She could not have described it in technical terms. She simply saw a man put something away, carefully, permanently, with the thoroughness of someone who knows that if they do not do it completely, they will not be able to do it at all. He had smiled at Lavinia on the steps of the church. He had shaken Reginald Sterling's hand. He had left the county for 8 months. When he came back, he was the version of himself that the county had come to know as cold. Prudence, who had known the before, understood what cold actually was. She had kept it in the careful internal drawer where she kept everything she had observed in 20 years of service and was professionally obligated not to say. She was beginning to think the drawer needed opening. She gave him tea because refusing to give him tea would have been a declaration she was not ready to make with the auctioneer still in the hall. Prudence brought the tray with the expression of a woman exercising the full weight of 20 years of professional restraint. She set it down. She looked at Arthur Wellesley for one long moment, the look of a woman who knew him before he was this, who remembered the Tuesday mornings in the back of the church and the 8 months he had been gone, and left without closing the door entirely. Lavinia poured. Her hands were steady. She had spent 2 years developing steady hands. "You did not have to come in person," she said. "No," Arthur agreed. "A solicitor could have managed the transaction." "Yes." She set the cup in front of him. She did not sit. She stood at the window with her own cup and looked at the garden, which was in the particular state of gardens that have not been tended in a year, where everything planted with intention has begun to lose its shape. "Then I will ask you plainly," she said, "why you are here." A pause. Not a hesitating pause, a considering one. The pause of a man deciding not how to answer, but how much of the answer to give. "I wish to speak with you," he said. "You have purchased my home and everything in it," she said. "You have in practical terms purchased me along with the contents, since I have nowhere else to go and no means to go there. I cannot imagine what remains to be said between us that required a personal visit." She turned from the window and looked at him. He was looking at her with an attention she had not braced for, one she had braced for satisfaction, the quality of a man surveying what his victory has produced. What she found instead was something she could not immediately name, and that was in its own way more unsettling. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, "I did not come to survey the wreckage." "What would you call it then?" He picked up his cup, set it down again without drinking, looked at his hands on the table in a way that suggested he was choosing words with care he did not ordinarily need. "Your husband and I had a disagreement," he said. "A disagreement." The word left her flat and final, the way a stone lands. "You destroyed his business interests over 18 months, called in debts that had been held quietly for years, and ensured that every man of standing in the county knew the particulars of his financial situation before he had any opportunity to address them. I would not call that a disagreement." "No," he said. "I imagine you would not." "Then what would you call it?" He looked at her directly then, and there was that quality again, the one from the entrance hall, the one she could not name and did not want to spend time naming because naming it would require her to look at it more carefully than she was prepared to. "Necessary," he said. The words sat in the room between them. Lavinia set down her cup. "Get out," she said, "of this room. If not of this house, since it appears the house is no longer mine to ask you to leave." He stood without argument. He moved to the door and stopped at the threshold. "I will not crowd you," he said, without turning. "I did not come to crowd you. But I would ask, when you are ready and not before, that you allow me to show you something you have not seen." A pause that carried more weight than pauses usually carry. "It could not be sent in a letter. That is the reason I am here, and not a solicitor." She said nothing. He left. Prudence appeared in the doorway 4 seconds later, which confirmed she had been in the corridor the entire time. "He's not what I expected," Prudence said, in the tone of a woman who means considerably more than she is saying. "Go away, Prudence," said Lavinia. Prudence went. Lavinia stood at the window and pressed her fingers against the cold glass, and thought about the word necessary, and felt the first small, unwelcome loosening of a certainty she had been holding for 2 years. She held it tighter. He did not crowd her. She had expected him to. She had expected the daily presence of a man who owns a thing and wishes you to know he owns it. The small, deliberate assertions of possession that men in his position had every social and legal right to make. She had prepared herself for it with the thoroughness she brought to all unpleasant necessities. He was not daily present. He came twice in the first week, both times for meetings with the estate solicitor, and both times he passed her in the corridor with a nod and nothing further, and conducted his business and left. The second week he sent a letter. "Mrs. Sterling, I have spoken with Mr. Briggs regarding the household arrangements." It is my intention that you should remain in residence for as long as you require, with the full staff complement restored at my expense. This requires nothing from you in return. I ask only that you consider, at your convenience, the conversation I mentioned. A.W. She read it 3 times. Then she wrote back, Your Grace, I did not ask for your charity, and I do not require your staff. As for the conversation, I will consider it when I have determined it would serve any purpose beyond your own. L.S. His reply came the following morning. Mrs. Sterling, it is not charity. The house requires staff to function, and I have a practical interest in the house functioning. Regarding the conversation, I have no interest in my own purposes. I have been misunderstood on that point for some years, and I find I have stopped trying to correct it. The offer stands regardless. A.W. She read the line, I have stopped trying to correct it 4 times. She put the letter in the drawer. She thought about it for 3 days. On the 4th day, she wrote again. Your Grace, come on Thursday. L.S. He came with a leather case. Not large, not the case of a man arriving to overwhelm, but a narrow thing worn at the corners, the case of something kept close for a long time. He set it on the drawing room table and did not open it immediately. Before I show you this, he said, I want you to know that I did not bring it to excuse myself. I brought it because you have been living inside a version of events constructed to prevent you from seeing the truth, and you have a right to the truth regardless of what you do with it afterward. Lavinia sat across from him with her hands in her lap. Reginald constructed it, he said. Reginald was very good at construction. Something in his voice, flat, tired, the voice of a man who has known this for a long time and has stopped finding it remarkable. He was good at a great many things you were not permitted to see. He opened the case. Inside were letters, folded, labeled in a neat archival hand, and beneath them a set of accounts, 3 columns of figures across several pages, annotated throughout. She looked at the accounts first, because her father had taught her that numbers were the one honest thing in a room where everything else might be managed. It took her 5 minutes to understand what she was looking at. She looked up. These are my accounts, she said. Yes. My personal accounts, my father's inheritance, the property in... All of it, he said. The room was very quiet. He transferred it. The words felt strange in her mouth. Over 4 years, beginning... She looked at the date on the first transfer. Something moved behind her eyes. 8 months after our wedding. Yes. She set down the accounts. She picked up the first letter, read it, set it down, picked up the second. Her hands were not steady now, and she did not try to make them steady, because some things do not require steady hands. The letters were between Reginald and his solicitor, businesslike, occasionally impatient, the language of a man managing a project. The project was her. He told me my father's estate had been poorly managed, she said. Her voice came from somewhere that felt far away. Before his death, he told me there was very little left. He was very kind about it. He held my hand. Arthur said nothing. She looked at him. You knew. I found out, he said, in the course of a business matter between us. I had heard rumors, his gambling, certain other habits, and when the Calderton investment came to my desk and the figures did not hold, I had him cross-checked. He said it without the apparatus of self-justification. When I understood what I was looking at, I went to him directly. I told him to come clean to you, to stop what he was doing and tell you the truth. She was very still. He refused. He smiled at me, Arthur said, and told me I had no proof that would stand in any court, and that gentlemen did not make accusations they could not substantiate, and suggested I concern myself with my own affairs. She knew that smile. She had spent 6 years finding it reassuring. So you called in his debts, she said. I made his ability to continue doing this impossible, he said. I called in what he owed. I ensured the men enabling him understood that their own positions depended on their distance from him. I applied every pressure available to me. He looked at her steadily. And the pressure, the accumulation of it, his heart was not strong. I did not know that. I want you to know that I did not know that. She stood up. She walked to the window. The November garden was stripped bare, everything reduced to its actual structure, the bones of things visible in a way they were not when leaves were on them. She had been married to Reginald for 6 years. He had been to her face a good husband, attentive, present. He had held her hand when he told her the inheritance was diminished, and his eyes had been kind, and she had believed him because she had looked at his face and not at the accounts, because she had not known to look at the accounts, because he had known she would not look. He loved me, she said. It came out strange, not a defense, not a conclusion, just a thing she was turning over to examine its underside. In his way. I believe he did. I believe that also, Arthur said, and the absence of cruelty in it was its own kind of information. But he was doing this at the same time. Yes. Both things, simultaneously. Yes. She pressed her hand flat against the window glass. Outside, a blackbird landed on the garden wall and regarded the bare beds with the philosophical detachment of a creature for whom winter is simply one of the seasons and not the end of anything. Why did you not tell me directly, she said, when you found out, before he died? A pause long enough that she turned from the window to look at him. He was looking at the table. Then he looked up, and what was in his face was the expression of a man answering a question he has asked himself in the private court of his own conscience many times. Because I went to him first, he said. I believed, perhaps naively, that given the opportunity to do the right thing, he would take it, that it would be better coming from him. Something moved in his jaw. When he refused, I had a choice between coming to you with information that would destroy your marriage and your understanding of your own life, or finding another way to stop what he was doing without requiring you to hold all of it at once. He paused. I chose wrong. I can see now that I chose wrong. You deserved the truth from the beginning, and I made that decision on your behalf without your knowledge, and I am telling you so plainly. She looked at him for a long time. You made that choice, she said, and then he died, and the version of events that remained was one in which you were the man who had destroyed him. Yes, and you let that stand. You were grieving, he said, simply, without defense. However he had treated you in private, whatever he had done, you had lost your husband and you were grieving. I had no right to walk into your mourning and take that from you as well. Not then. She looked at him with the full attention of a woman who has spent 2 years being told this man was cold and is standing in front of evidence that cold was never the right word, had never been the right word, and finding that more disorienting than the original story had been. And now, she said, now you are being sold out of your own house to settle debts that should never have existed, and you are blaming me for it, and I find... He stopped, looked at his hands, looked up. I find I have run out of willingness to be the villain in a story I did not write. She looked at the accounts and the letters spread between them on the table, and she felt the story she had been living inside for 2 years turn over in her hands and show her its other side. Leave the case, she said. Leave the room. Give me an hour. He left the case. He left the room. She read everything from the beginning, every figure, every letter, every annotation in the margin. An hour became 2. Prudence appeared with tea at some point, and with a look on her face that said she had things to say, and was choosing for now not to say them. When Lavinia looked up, the light had changed entirely. Where is he? She said. Sitting on the bench in the entrance hall, Prudence said. He's been there since he left this room. Lavinia looked at the door. Tell him to come back in, she said. He came back and they talked, and nothing resolved entirely. Nothing as large as this resolves in a single afternoon. But something had changed in the way they occupied the same space, in the quality of the silences between them. She saw him at the village market 2 weeks later, not entirely by accident, and he was at the bookseller's stall reading the back of something, Rural Drainage and Land Management, with the absorbed attention of a man for whom reading was a function of being alive. Are you managing land or reading yourself to sleep? She said. The machinery for smiling existed in him, she was learning, but had been put into storage some years ago and was only recently being located again. The Alderton farm has a drainage problem unaddressed for 4 years. I prefer to understand what I am dealing with before I speak to the tenant. Reginald never read anything about land management, she said, and stopped, because she had not meant to say it, and the saying of it produced a strange, flat sensation. Not grief exactly, not anger, but the recognition of a fact, unadorned. He did not fill the silence. He waited in the way she was learning was his, not a waiting that pressed, but one that remained available, that made no demands on her or on the silence. He told me you were cold, she said. Everyone said so. The cold Duke of Wren's Crest. He looked at the book in his hands. I know what was said. Is it true? He was quiet for a moment. When he looked up, there was something in his face she had not seen before. Not the managed composure she had been reading as coldness, but the composure of a man who has decided that honesty is the only thing he has left to offer. No, he said. One word. Nothing appended. She looked at him in the thin November light with the market moving around them and felt something she had no immediate category for. Come to the house on Thursday, she said. We will look at the Alderton drainage proposal together. I am better with figures than most people Reginald allowed me to demonstrate it to. She walked away before she could see his face do whatever it did after she said that. She had not known, before Arthur Wellesley became a fixture of her Thursday afternoons, that she had been lonely. She had been sad, yes. Grieving, yes. Managing, constantly, the practical and social consequences of a ruined estate and a dead husband. But lonely was different from sad, and she had not identified it until the Thursdays became the days she organized the rest of the week around. He brought the estate accounts. She read them better than he had expected. She saw this in the adjustment of his attention the first time she found an inconsistency in the Alderton figures that his own solicitor had missed. The way he looked at her, and then at the page, and then at her again, as though recalibrating something he had already filed as settled. My father taught me, she said. He taught you well. He taught me because he believed women who understood their own finances were women who could not be easily managed. She said it without looking up from the ledger. He was more right than he knew. A silence that was not uncomfortable. He was a good man, Arthur said. Your father. She looked up. You knew him well. Well enough. Said in the tone of a man who means more than the words carry. He returned to the accounts, and she let him, but she filed the tone away in the place she was collecting things she did not yet know what to do with. He left at 5 o'clock with the accounts under his arm, and the following morning she found a book on the drawing room table, Estate Management, a chapter on tenant lease terms marked with a folded paper. No note, just the book and the marked page. She sat with it for a long time before she opened it. Then she put it in the second drawer of the writing desk, which was becoming, she noticed, a place of accumulation. She went to bed and lay in the dark and was sensible about all of it for a very long time. Sensible, it turned out, had its limits. It was Prudence who opened the drawer. Not literally. Literally. Prudence came into the drawing room on a Wednesday morning in December and found Lavinia sitting at the writing desk with the estate accounts open in front of her, and the look on her face that meant she was not reading the accounts, but thinking about something else while appearing to read them, and Prudence set down the breakfast tray and stood for a moment and made the decision she had been building toward for 20 years. "You know he used to ride over every Tuesday," Prudence said. Lavinia looked up. "I beg your pardon?" "When you were young, before you were out." Prudence straightened the tray with the deliberate care of a woman buying herself a moment. "Master Arthur, he used to ride over every Tuesday because Tuesday was your father's reading morning, and he had decided, I think when he was about 14, that wherever you were was where he preferred to be." Lavinia set down her pen. "Your father knew," Prudence said. "I always thought your father knew. He never said anything, and Master Arthur never said anything. And then Mr. Sterling arrived, and Master Arthur said nothing then either." She stopped, smoothed her apron. "And I watched him stand at the back of that church on your wedding day. Everyone else was watching you. I was watching him." She paused. "I watched him put it away," she said. "Whatever it was. I watched him decide to put it away because you seemed happy, and he thought your being happy was more important than—" She stopped, started again. "He left the county for 8 months. When he came back, he was the version of himself people call cold. And I have spent 20 years knowing that cold was not the right word for it, and never had cause to say so until you started sitting at that desk, looking at accounts you are not reading." Lavinia looked at her hands on the desk. "He loves you," Prudence said. Present tense, deliberate. "I don't know what he has or hasn't said to you in these Thursday meetings of yours, but I know what I have seen since he came back to this county. And I know what I saw on the day you married Mr. Sterling, and they are the same thing 20 years apart." She picked up the breakfast tray. She moved toward the door. "The second drawer of his writing desk at Wren's Crest," she said without turning. "I cleaned that study for 15 years before I came to you. He keeps things in the second drawer that he does not let anyone see. I never looked. It was not my place. But I know the drawer exists, and I know what kind of man keeps a drawer like that." She left. Lavinia sat at the writing desk for a long time. She looked at her own second drawer, the book with the marked page, the letters she had kept for reasons she had been calling practical, the tea he had brought without being asked. She thought about a boy of 14 who rode over every Tuesday. She thought about a man who stood at the back of a church and put something away. She thought about 20 years of being told Arthur Wellesley was cold, and never once asking the person who had known him longest what cold actually meant. She thought about a leather case worn at the corners, kept close for a long time. She thought about necessary. She sat with all of it for the rest of the day, and in the evening she wrote a note and sent it with the Morning Post. "Your Grace, I wonder if I might call on you at Wren's Crest. There is something I wish to see. L.S." His reply came by return. "Mrs. Sterling, come whenever you wish. The house is always open to you. It has always been open to you. A.W." She read the last sentence 3 times. "It has always been open to you." A man who wished to say nothing would have stopped at the first sentence. She put the note in the second drawer and did not sleep until nearly 4 in the morning. He met her at the door himself. Not a footman. Himself, as though he had been watching for the carriage, which she did not examine too closely because examining it would require her to examine what it meant, and she was not ready to do that before she had seen what she had come to see. He showed her through the house with the ease of a man on familiar ground, answering her questions about the estate when she asked them, pointing out the drainage work on the south field, the library his father had begun and he had continued, and then the garden, larger than hers, better kept, and along the east wall, a rose variety she recognized. She stopped. "Souvenir de la Malmaison," she said. "Yes." She looked at the roses, winter bare, cut to their framework, the canes stripped and patient, the same variety that had been uncovered in her own garden after years of neglect. She looked at them and something assembled itself in her chest without her permission. "These have been here a long time," she said. 15 years, he said. The roses in my garden, the same variety. You knew they were there, under the neglect. You had them restored. Yes. You knew what was in that garden before you bought the estate. He said nothing. His face was doing the thing it did when he was being very careful, and the carefulness itself was an answer. She looked at the wall of roses in the December light and felt something move through her that she did not try to name, because naming it would have required her to stop feeling it, and she was not ready to stop. You may think me impertinent, she said, for what I am about to ask. I have never found you impertinent, he said quietly. The second drawer of your writing desk, she said. The garden went very still. He looked at her then, fully, with the quality of attention she had been learning to read correctly. And she watched him make a decision, not to close the door, to open it. Come inside, he said, and the study at Wren's Crest was a larger, older version of the rooms she had spent her Thursdays in, the same quality of inhabited intelligence, books that had been read rather than displayed, papers in a system that looked like disorder and was not. He went to the desk. He opened the second drawer. He stepped back from it. She crossed the room and looked in. There were letters, not many, tied with a plain ribbon, the paper slightly aged. Beneath them, a small pencil sketch, loose, the kind a person makes without intending to make a finished thing. And beneath that, a single pressed flower between two pieces of card, brown with age, kept with the care of something that matters to only one person in the world, and that person knows it. She picked up the sketch first. It was her. Younger, the garden at her father's house visible in the background, which placed it at least 20 years ago. She was reading, unaware of being drawn, and the quality of the image carried that unawareness entirely, the unguarded look of a person caught being entirely themselves when they believe no one is watching. It was not the sketch of a man documenting a friend. She set it down carefully. She looked at the pressed flower, a garden rose, the kind that grew along the south wall of her father's house, the same wall she had sat beside on Tuesday mornings at 19 when Arthur Wellesley rode over to discuss her father's reading. She had not known he took one. She had not known he took anything. She stood at the desk with her hands very still, and she understood. With the full and irreversible understanding of a thing that cannot be unknown, the complete shape of what she was looking at. 20 years of it. A boy of 14 deciding that wherever she was where he preferred to be. A man of 22 standing at the back of a church and putting something away because she seemed happy. A man of 40 driving to a house being emptied by strangers and sitting on a bench in the entrance hall for an hour, saying only what needed saying and nothing more, because he had never once in 20 years used what he felt to claim anything from her. She turned around. He was standing at the window with his back to her, looking out at the December garden, and she looked at the back of him and felt something complete itself in her chest, one like a sentence that has been waiting a very long time for its final word. "Arthur," she said. He turned. She looked at him, at the face she had been told was cold, at the man she had spent 2 years blaming, at the person who had loved her in silence for 20 years and had never once asked her to know it, and she felt the last of the old story leave her, not in pieces, all at once, the clean departure of something that has served its purpose and is finished. "You should have told me," she said, 20 years ago. "You should have told me." "Yes," he said, no qualification, no defense, simply yes, in the voice of a man who has agreed with this in private for a long time and is now agreeing with it aloud. "I might not have—" She stopped. She did not know how to finish that sentence honestly, and she was finished with dishonest sentences. "I cannot tell you what I would have chosen. I was young and I was foolish about certain things, but I deserved the chance to choose. Yes. You made the choice for me. The same way you made the choice about the accounts, about when to tell me and when not to. You have spent 20 years deciding what I can and cannot handle." She was not raising her voice. This was not that kind of anger. It was the quiet, clear kind, the kind that has had time to understand itself. "I need you to understand that I am finished being handled." Something in his face broke open, not dramatically. A small structural thing, the way a wall releases at one point and then everything follows, quietly, without announcement. "You are right," he said. "In everything you have said, you are entirely right." He looked at her with the full, unmanaged attention she had been learning to receive, and there was nothing withheld in it now, nothing filed, nothing held at careful distance. "I was a coward at 22, and everything that followed came from that, and I have known it for 20 years. I am not asking you to forgive it. I am asking only that you know the whole of it, which you now do, and that whatever you do with it is yours entirely. I have made enough choices on your behalf. I am finished making them." She looked at the open drawer, the sketch, the pressed flower. 20 years in a desk in a man's study, kept not to be used, not to be leveraged, not to produce any outcome, simply kept because some things you keep even when you cannot look at them, because putting them away entirely is a thing you find, like when you try, that you cannot do. She crossed the room. 3 steps. She looked at him from close enough that there was no distance left to manage, and she said, "I am going to be angry about Reginald for some time, not at you. I understand the distinction, but the anger needs somewhere to go, and it will sometimes come out sideways, and I need you to understand what it is actually about when it does." "Yes," he said. "And I am going to be angry at you also," she said, "for the 20 years, and for the choices made on my behalf without my knowledge. I need that to be something you can hear without deciding it means I am asking you to leave." "I can hear it," he said. "And you are going to tell me things," she said, "directly, to my face, not in books left on tables, not in roses planted along a wall where I might or might not notice them." She looked at him steadily. "If something matters, you will say so, in actual words, to me." Something in him was working very hard, and not entirely succeeding. "Yes," he said, "all of it." "All of it," he said. "Yes, all of it, Lavinia." Her name, not Mrs. Sterling, not the formal management of a man maintaining distance. Her name, in the voice of someone who had been saying it in the private interior of himself for 20 years and was saying it aloud, finally, in the room where it was always supposed to have been said. She reached out and took his hand. Not a grand gesture, simply that, her hand in his, the way you reach for something you have been circling for a long time and have finally, now with full knowledge of the cost and full acceptance of the uncertainty, decided to take hold of. His hand closed around hers. The warmth of it surprised her. "I have conditions," she said. The sound that came from him was not quite a laugh. It was the sound of a man who has been holding something for 20 years and is setting it down finally, and finding that the setting down feels like breathing. Like a house that has been waiting for someone to come home and has finally heard the door. "Of course you do," he said. "I will manage my own accounts," she said. "Every one of them. Nobody touches my accounts." Agreed. The roses need a full season to recover. I want to see them in June, at both houses. "Then we will see them," he said, and "we" in his voice was a word that had been waiting a long time to be used, and was now, finally, in its correct place. "And the drawer," she said. He looked at her. "You will not need it any more," she said. "Whatever you have been keeping in it that you thought you could not say, you will say it. To me. That is what I am here for, if I am here at all." He looked at her for a long moment, and everything in his face was present and unmanaged, and entirely, finally real. "You are here," he said. "You are entirely here." Outside, the December garden was bare and structured and quietly waiting, the roses cut to their bones, the beds clear, everything stripped back to what it actually was rather than what it appeared to be in more forgiving seasons. It did not look like much. It looked like a beginning. It looked like the kind of thing that takes time and intention and the willingness to stay through the seasons that are not yet bloom. She held his hand in the study at Wren's Crest, and the drawer was open, and nothing in this house was put away anymore. What has someone decided for you, without asking, that you have been living inside ever since? Leave one word. Tuesday. If you understood what it meant that he rode over every Tuesday and she never knew why. Drawer. If you have ever kept something in the dark because you believed the person you kept it for deserved more than what you had to offer. June. If you have ever needed someone to say, "We will be there," and mean it without condition. If you know someone who has been loved in silence and does not know it yet, send them this. They will feel it somewhere they did not know needed feeling. Subscribe for stories where the wound goes all the way down, the truth costs something real to find, and the ending earns every word that came before it. He had loved her for 20 years in a drawer in his desk. She had been 3 miles away the entire time. The distance between them was never geography. It was the choice he made at 22, and the 20 years it took for her to find the drawer, and the moment she crossed the room anyway. That moment. That was always going to be the whole story.